issue is what's around it, like division rivals. Now, division rivals is the other form of time gating, one in the fact that your rewards get capped after a certain amount of matches, but the other is the time in which you receive them. Basically, after you earn those rewards, there's no reason left to play division rivals. You can't get improved rewards strictly by playing more, and you have to wait a week to get them, all while resetting your progress towards said rewards. Now, on one hand, as we all know, life can get hectic, and sometimes you just aren't able to play as much as you normally would during the week. You could be one win away from getting rewards, but suddenly something comes up and you miss out because it doesn't save your progress. On the other hand, it's also harder to grind because if someone does have a week where they have significantly more free time, they can't play it repeatedly to get rewards as it gets capped after a certain amount. Now, when Division Rivals was first introduced in FIFA 19, it was somehow in a much worse state than it is now because your rewards would be affected by how much you play and how much others would play. Seriously, what the was that about? I'm still upset thinking about that. But while it's a better system now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. The system before FIFA 19, online seasons, was a much better grind, one that was not time-gated. You could play however much you wanted, it would save your progress, and you get your rewards immediately after finishing a season. No waiting for the week to finish to continue your grind, and no getting your point total reset if you have a busy week. You can just play. Now, like I said, these are the two game modes that everyone plays, but there seems to be some confusion around them because Champs is supposed to be the ultra-competitive mode. In fact, that's why it worked back in FIFA 17 and 18, but at the moment, like I said, there's some confusion because now Division Rivals is starting to overtake it as the main competitive mode. Now, two game modes fighting to be the ultimate competition is not good in any situation, but it's made worse by the fact that there's no casual game mode to help balance it. With gauntlets and tournaments introduced, one of them had to be that casual mode, and it is certainly not gauntlets. I mean, just look at the second gauntlet that was released. You have 2 attempts per day, and it's out for 4 days, meaning you have 8 attempts to achieve a perfect round, and 24 matches to get 12 wins. Now, even though you're using new players and new squads every 4 rounds, this is obviously a more competitive environment because it's time gating while setting a limit on how many entries you get. The thing is, this actually makes sense, and it's similar to Champs in this regard. There are certain boards and game modes that should be aimed towards the competitive environment, which also means that time gating does have a place and time. Gauntlet is not the ideal game mode to set up a casual grind system, and it also just defeats the purpose of gauntlets in general if you can do it whenever you want, meaning having it being time-gated makes sense. Along with this, based on the rewards that you can get, with some of them being achievable just by playing, I don't mind having it be out for a short period of time. The only issue was having a set number of attempts per day. That was annoying, and that needs to change. That leaves tournaments as the only game mode that can realistically have a non-time-gated system, one that allows users to play the game whenever they want, try out new tactics and players, and experience a more casual environment while earning small rewards when everything else is geared towards competitive matches. But that's obviously not what's happening because, again, why else would we be talking about this? The way tournaments are currently set up do not make them easily grindable or casual for a few reasons. One, they have entry limits, meaning if you run out of attempts, you are not able to try again. Now, I'm okay with this if there was a special tournament that gave double rewards, or if there was like a special card like there was back in FIFA 17 and 18 for special cards, like Foot Birthday or Team of the Season, for example, but this should not be the case in general. The other issue is that tournaments often don't have a consistent schedule. If they show up and you're busy that week, the game does not care. You could potentially be limited in 2 different ways, both of them related to time gating. It could be limiting because of the entry limit, but it's more likely that the second reason, being time gated by when it's released and when it ends, is what will get you in the end. And this combination severely hinders the casual environment, the grind, and the overall fun of Ultimate Team. imagine a tournament that doesn't have entry limits and that doesn't expire. You could play all the games that you want. You could earn an untradeable gold pack or a premium gold pack, for example, and you could earn that said reward immediately. You don't have to wait for your attempts to refresh. You don't have to wait for your rewards. You can just play. At the moment, there is nothing, literally nothing in Ultimate Team that is open 24/7 that you can grind. Now, I mentioned at the start of the video that playing the Silver Warm-Up Exhibition was sincerely enjoyable, more enjoyable than anything I've done in this game for a very long time. Small rewards just for playing and winning. No entry limit, open for literally weeks. I mean, it was pure vibes. If this was repeatable, gave similar rewards, and allowed gold evos to be upgraded, I'd have been playing that non-stop, and that's what bothers me so much. This type of setup is clearly possible, not just because it's been in the game before a few years ago, but also because we finally have tournaments back. The perfect game mode for this non-time-gated, fully grindable, casual system. You don't even have to get rid of competitive tournaments either. In fact, you can even add soft time-gated tournaments every now and again in order to help people upgrade their teams, no matter how much they play. The point of a soft time-gated system will be to incentivize the very first tournament win, and then each reward system after that will be slightly less, but still enough to incentivize the hardcore grinders. So that means that those who don't really grind that much will still get the quote-unquote best rewards after winning their first tournament, but those who do want to continue that grind will still get rewarded for each subsequent tournament win. And again, do not have tournament entries. That's the main thing. Now, this could be similar to Call of Duty's Double XP Weekend, or releasing something during a major promo like Team of the Year or Team of the Season. The point is that with all of these time-gated game modes in Ultimate Team, there needs to be something that incentivizes hardcore grinders and casual players to play, and tournaments seem to be the answer. So please, EA, put in a tournament that is open 24/7 with no entry limits, giving us something to both grind and also just casually play. Because I need more of this man in my life. Like, I need him. Yalby OEF. These guys might be the biggest underdog that we've seen since Leicester City. And I'm not trying to discredit other great underdogs that we've recently seen, like FC Sheriff or Kairat, but the key difference, the thing that makes them more similar to Leicester than anyone else, is that they actually won their league. Now, I'm going to guess that a lot of you probably heard that they won the league, especially on the day it happened. People were talking about the town population size, they were talking about the club's rise in ranks. Maybe you heard that the CEO will run naked through his neighborhood after promising his son to do so if they would win the league, something he hasn't done yet. Trust me, I've looked. But we're going to go a little more in depth and look at how Galbi got to the situation in the first place, because while the small town plays a huge part in their identity, they're actually not that good historically. When the Swedish League was formed in 1924, they were not part of the original founding clubs. Most of them were from Stockholm, a place that actually has people in it. Now, I've seen reports saying that Mjölby itself has around 800 people, while the locality that it's based in has around 1,500 people. So by doing some cool math stuff, yes, I like math, it makes sense. The locality is about 7,100 times smaller than Sweden's population, and Mjölby is about 13,000 times smaller. Based on Sweden's 1924 population of 6 million people, that means the locality had roughly 850 people, and Mjölby itself had a little over 450. Obviously, looking like these guys to the league initially. I know how we joke about leagues being farmer leagues or clubs being just full of plumbers or things like that. This club, this town, is literally a fisherman club. That's what this is. In fact, the only reason why they were formed 15 years later in 1939 was because people in the town wanted something to support, because there was nothing else going on. The The thing is, anything that comes from a tiny town like that is going to have a very strong and loyal fan base, despite its size. So even though the club stayed in the amateur and lower leagues for the better part of 4 decades, the fan base and support grew stronger, as did the club's infrastructure. Eventually, they became a more established club in the second division, and then in 1980, they got promoted to the top flight for the very first time, and that garnered much praise and recognition from the rest of the league and the country because, and for the 1000th time, they are tiny. Now, they didn't do too well exactly in their very first season, not only getting relegated, but also coming in dead last. I mean, if you don't win the league every season, what's the point in even competing, am I right? It's like supporting QPR or something. You need to have like a top-tier club to support. I really hope someone gets that reference, please. However, Mjällby would go on to establish themselves as a constant in the Swedish footballing world for the next decade, constantly yo-yoing in the 1980s, staying in the second division in the early 1990s, and building a stadium that held nearly 6 times as many people as their town, which is genuinely hilarious. But their small size and budget meant that it would always be difficult for them to compete with the Swedish giants around them. I mean, they never stayed in the top flight 4 consecutive seasons and would switch to yo-yoing between the second and third division in the late 90s and early 2000s. Eventually, they would win the second tier in 2009 and see themselves back in the top flight for the very first time since 1985. And not only that, they would actually stay there for 5 consecutive seasons before once again succumbing to relegation. But even worse, the club would suffer another relegation the following season to the third tier. And on the final match day of the 2016 season, here's where Mjällby found themselves. On the cusp of bankruptcy and financial ruin, on the cusp of a third consecutive relegation, and on the cusp of losing its professional status. Now, a year before finding themselves in that precarious position, Mjällby would go on to hire Magnus Amaeus, a local businessman, as the head chairman of the club. And then he would go on to implement a revolutionary, at least for the club, transfer policy. And that would go on to have a huge impact on the club. Seeing as they were in the third tier and constantly losing money, Amaeus made a rule implementing the use of free transfers and selling young talents. And this policy began immediately. Now, at the beginning of the 2016 season, the club would sell 3 players for at least some amount of money. Perhaps around the player's value at that time. I'm not going to lie, I'm not entirely sure. It does not tell me. But that was at least more than previous seasons. And one of those players was a youth academy player, making the club pure profit. At the same time, every player that was brought in was done so for free. Again, being contrary to previous Mjällby. If they happened to stay up, then they would have built themselves a great foundation for the future. But if they go down, all of that hard work will have been for naught. So, once again, we find themselves on the final match day on the cusp of complete ruin. Now, thankfully, they would go on to win 3-0 against the relegation candidates, and that would have Mjällby stay up. And that would be a huge, significant turning point for the club. After barely surviving the previous season, Mjällby would go on to nearly get promoted the following year before actually getting promoted 2 times in 2 seasons to get themselves back into the top flight 3 years after nearly going bankrupt. Now, I briefly went over some of the financial aspects of Mjällby, at least some of their policies due to transfers, but I want to dive in a little bit deeper just to show you how big of a difference it is between Mjällby and some of the top clubs in Sweden, because this is where it's potentially even more insane than Leicester winning the title. Alright, so Malmo, yes, I'm using green screen again. Alright, shut up. Malmo is Sweden's most successful club historically. Look at their annual turnover, which was around 40 million euros or so, right? Mjällby's annual turnover is 6 million euros. If you think some really sick math tricks, we can find out that Mjällby earned about 15 times less than these clubs. 15. Like 1-5. Now, to put that in perspective, right, let's look at Leicester City back in 2016, right? When they won the title, their annual tournament was around 129 million pounds, right? Compare that to Manchester City's, which was 391 million. That's, last time I checked, 15 is 5 times greater than 3. That's some more sick math. Do you understand how big of a difference it is between Sweden's top clubs and now? Even if you look at Mjällby's annual with Champions League stuff, right? It would still be around 8.5 million euros, which is still a much larger gap than Leicester City and Manchester City in 2016. Okay? Seriously, do you get how insane this is? You can think that Leicester City's titles are special or more improbable. I think that you can think that. But the financial aspect, it is not comparable at all. Imagine this skinny dude is Mjällby, right? Who then just gets up and beats the shit out of this other guy. That's the terrible situation here. Yes, they would go on to establish themselves as a consistent club, partly due to the financial work from Mayes, but also from the coaching of manager Anders Torstensen and assistant manager Carl Marius Axel. So the former is actually in the middle of his third stint as the club's manager, leading the team for a year in 2013 and 2021, and now being in charge since 2023. The thing is, he wasn't even a full-time manager during his time away from Mjällby. He was a principal, once again confirming that the club, including the staff, are part-timers, making the story even more wild. The assistant, meanwhile, was hired in January of 2024, but he literally has never coached at the professional level before. However, because of his PhD in visual perception and led to some creative ideas that he could regularly post on social media, and that is how he was hired. You hear that, Twitter attack? You're almost there. You're almost hired by a professional club. Just keep pushing up. So that is as that added stability has led to this season. And the accomplishments coming out of the league. Mjällby have the best defense in the league, and it is not even 17 goals conceded after 47 matches played, and the next closest has 27 conceded, a difference of 10 goals. Second, they don't rely on 1 or 2 players to score or provide assists. You can see the goal contributions are pretty evenly spread out with the squad, and they're the only club in the Swedish league with 3 players over 10 goal contributions. Those 2 key attributes have led to only 1 single loss during the entire campaign. That loss against AIK, the AIK champions, and the highest point total in league history. And that's another thing that makes this so impressive. While Leicester City took advantage of other clubs around them flailing or rebuilding, they didn't get a record number of points. In fact, they got the lowest number of points for a champion since Man United during the 2010-2011 season. Now, I'm not saying that to make it seem like Leicester City's title was less impressive than it was, okay? That's not what I'm trying to do. What I am trying to do is point out how insane it is that Mjällby have actually done what they've done. Now, that loss against AIK came during the 8th match week on May 11th. They have not lost since then, and they've only drawn 4 times as well. Basically, a typical match day for Mjällby ends in either a 1-0 win or a 2-0 win. Virtually every single week. Don't believe me? Let's take a look at some of their previous matches, shall we? 2-0 win, 1-0 win, 1-0 win, 1-1 draw, 1-0 win, 2-0 win, 2-0 win. It is inevitable. They are basically prime AC Milan, except Maldini could not get into this squad. In a footballing world currently dominated by billionaire owners, sometimes backed by an entire nation, Mjällby has shown that it's still possible to pull off a David versus Goliath achievement. Homegrown players, no rich owner, shrewd business, and a strong, loyal fan base seems to be all you need to succeed, even at the top level. So with all of that in mind, it seems as if I can raise a valid question. If Arsenal don't win anything this year, will that be the end of me? Yes, it will. You don't, it's like, yes.
Big question that we absolutely have to ask because everybody's talking about it and we haven't had the discussion on Lengua de la Liga. Has Vinicius Jr.'s time at Real Madrid come to an end? Is it over? I personally do not know, but if anybody does not know where the context comes from, Vinny had a massive blow up. I think with purely Xabi Alonso. I won't say it was with the club, but a massive blow up when he was substituted out in El Clasico with 20 minutes to play. You all saw what happened on camera. He was pissed. He stormed off the field, went immediately into the locker room. Has the romantic relationship become toxic? And is it time for a breakup? What do you guys think?
I struggle to say yes. I feel like in that moment, I could imagine it was a very spur of the moment kind of deal. Yes, he's been hard done in some scenarios, but at the same time, I feel like the club has fully backed him when no one else has. I mean, you look at the Ballon d'Or ceremonies, right? Particularly that one season where he was a heavy favorite to win it. Like, the whole club backed him for being disrespected in their eyes, at least. I feel like with that, with the success you've had with Real Madrid, I feel like it'd be very overly sensitive is what I would say. If at this point in time Vinicius is now done with the team, I think he has some reason to feel a little hard done by. Yes, I think with Xabi being fairly new still, and a lot of other reports are coming out about him, or maybe he's a little too tough in practice at the trainings and what I've heard. Maybe it's built up. Exactly though. Like, right, that's what I'm saying is like how much really are they hurting you as a player personally? Maybe this is we don't know about, but from what we can tell, I think it's a little too much. I think leaving now would be a big mistake.
I have a question for everyone. How many times do you think this season Vinicius has completed the 90 minutes?
I'd say a single time.
I was going to say three.
He has played 3 times. Once against Villarreal, the Madrid derby, and Levante. Every other game, he's either come off the bench or been substituted in the 70th or 65th minute. So I think for Vinicius, when it was that reaction getting subbed off against Barcelona, I can actually understand him. I would be pissed off too if I was a player. You're going to substitute me. I'm the one wreaking havoc on these guys. Koundé didn't know what to do against me. Of course, look, the thumbs up. See, he should give the thumbs up to Xabi Alonso, maybe the middle finger, and saying, why are you substituting me? So I think it's a natural reaction. And obviously his comments afterwards, saying, I apologize to everybody. It's all that bullshit sort of political answer that you give when a player has this outrage. But One thing I did find interesting was he didn't apologize to the manager in that quote. He said it to the players, he said it to the club, not to Xabi Alonso. Now, I can understand Vinicius, and people want to go on Vinicius saying, why should you have that reaction? I think any ex-pro or anybody who's played football, if Jack was playing his 5 versus 5 and he's cooking that day, and if they had a manager on the sideline, he said, Jack, come on. How do you think Jack's going to respond? He'll probably be...
And Jose pulls me off?
Yeah. Oh, if Jose pulls you off.
Looked off. Dude, I'm kept up with sorry, dude. I'm waiting.
No, shut. Imagine had Vinny done that. Like, I was going to actually bring that up. Like, imagine he had, like, a Kepa scenario where it's just like, you don't know what you're doing, I'm good. That would be a fair, my opinion.
So, for Vinicius, it's just a natural reaction, and now it's really down to Xabi Alonso to keep the player happy. You cannot get one of your best players on the wrong side of you, because if that happens, you lose a player like Vinicius, and if you get 150 million, you can maybe go get Haaland or somebody out there, Ekitiki or somebody to play in the striker role, but Vinicius is still one of the best players in the world. For Real Madrid to possibly he goes to Arabia, which is most likely going to be the destination. I think that would be a horrible thing. 1, for La Liga, 2, for Real Madrid, and then, if other top players go to Real Madrid when Xabi Alonso's the manager, how are they going to feel the trustworthy from him? Because if it's all on Kylian Mbappe, he gets to play 90 minutes, what about me? It's like, then the dynamic and sort of psyche of the players with Xabi Alonso kind of goes away and fades away. And you definitely need that at Madrid. You need to keep all the players happy.
okay, maybe 1 or 2 players, it's not going to be the end of the world for him, but you at least got to keep a stable change room. And if Vinicius is, creating havoc or creating a negative approach in the locker room, that's on Xabi Alonso for me.
Yeah, no, and Michael, you're completely right. And I would argue that there already is the one player, the one superstar that Xabi Alonso is already phasing out, and his name's not Vinicius, it's Rodrigo. So if that's where Alonso, clearly he's coming in here, and he's a very powerful, he's an ex-legend, highly respected